Welcome to Fantasy Bros Fantasy Football Podcast. This is Joey Leo. We got Trevor O'Brien and Ryan Roberts here in the set.
How's it going, everybody? How we doing tonight?
So
also, just give us a idea. This is kind of we don't know necessarily if that's going to be the name for the podcast moving forward. So just give us some feedback if you like it or not, and then we can go from there. Okay?
So normally moving forward, all of our podcasts will be recorded on Wednesday nights, and they'll be sent out to you guys Thursday mornings. It'll normally be me and Trevor, but tonight we got Ryan as a special guest for the first podcast ever.
Hopefully he'll be coming on later on, but we'll see how his team's looking through round 3 and if he has anybody still starting. So
I'm excited, but
All right, so we're going to start off. We're going to look through the draft, give some of our initial reactions from it, some of what we think were the best picks, best values, and some of the worst values throughout it. So Trevor, you want to get us started? And we'll start it with a good mood. What do you think your best values were?
Okay, so we're going draft recap instead of going over the rosters, which is what we initially thought I was doing. So we're going to switch it up a little bit, guys, but that's okay. So going with our best value picks, I'm going to go starting in the first round, 7th overall pick. I know it's my team. By the way, my team name is now the Prisoner of HC 109, so hope you guys like that name. But Alvin Kamara at pick 7. You know, I had him ranked number 1 overall on my draft board. So being able to get him all the way in the middle of the first round and then being able to come back and get another high-end wide receiver, I just think was an absolute steal personally. I also looked in round 5, pick 10, Josh Gordon by the Michael Ramos Capuchins. I thought that was a really good pick too, especially if Josh Gordon, again, it's completely contingent upon the fact whether or not he stays healthy, whether or not he stays off of the weed. Given that he actually does that, I think he could be a great asset to the New England offense, and I think he could really do great things and potentially be a high-end wide receiver too, and he might even get into that wide receiver 1 territory a couple of weeks. So grabbing him in the 5th round is really beneficial. And then finally going into the double-digit rounds, I think in round 10, I think Devin Singletary. At the time of the draft, we really didn't know what the Bills' backfield looked like because they had just released LaShawn McCoy like 30 minutes before the draft started. But it was picked up by a bunch of Fantasy Frittata, which is Mikey McCormick's team. We'll get into his team a little bit later on in the podcast. But I just think that getting him in double-digit rounds, probably the starting running back for Buffalo, I think he has potential to be a running back too. So I really like those picks there.
And for me, if we're going to pat ourselves on the back, I think another really good value in the beginning of the draft was Travis Kelce falling down all the way to the end of the second round. If we'd done this draft a couple weeks ago, or even a month ago, Travis Kelce's going the end of the first couple picks in the second round, getting him all the way at the end of the second round. He gives you top wide receiver value at the tight end position, so it's something really helpful knowing you're going to win that matchup going into every week. Moving down a little bit later in the draft, one thing, and I hate to give Trevor credit for this, but I really like the Austin Eckler pick because if Melvin Gordon continues to hold out, that pick can be a running back. He has running back 1 potential, if not running back 2. So that's definitely something that's very good value a little bit later down in the draft. Moving down a little bit farther, one pick that I like myself is something that Mikey McCormick did, drafting DK Metcalf in, I believe, the 11th round. Just because when you get someone of that stature and that physical abilities, throw him in the red zone with no other receiving targets, I feel like he can easily come down with 8 touchdowns throughout the year.
I agree. Ryan, do you have anybody that you thought you might have went a little bit later than expected and thought was good value?
well, honestly, I think Greg Zuerlein coming in the 8th round. I'm thinking that's probably at least a top 3 pick in the draft. Also, getting Derek Carr was at the 10th round. 10th round, probably, no, not probably, yeah, 12th round. I think it's also another great pick too. I think 2 great picks by that team, so I think you really can't go wrong with those 2. I also think Melvin Gordon, which is my pick, also in the 4th round. A little, controversial because I know he won't, he doesn't have a contract right now or he's kind of in disputes. But I think eventually he'll sign with the team and it will be the Chargers, but whoever it is, he will be a top 10 running back, so I'm excited about that. But those are my thoughts.
All right. That's very interesting. I mean, again, the reports coming out earlier today that it doesn't look like Melvin Gordon will be getting traded this year.
Oh,
So we'll have to wait and see if he does, or if he reports to camp, or if he shows up at all at the Chargers facilities. If not, then Eckler is just going to get a major, major boost, which is something, again, I'm looking forward to. But Ryan touched on a little bit. He said he thought value picks. I'm actually going to go off of that too, because we're going to go into picks that we thought were maybe reaches. And I do believe Greg Zuerlein in the 8th round was a bit of a reach. I'm all for getting top players at their various positions. However, taking a kicker anywhere but the last round, I just think is asinine. And I think the 8th round was a bit high for that player. So I think you certainly could have gotten Greg Zuerlein at least in the 10th round, but you certainly could have gotten a kicker of the same caliber in round 16. Also, actually going one pick before that, Jamison Crowder getting taken by C.J. Rocks in the 8th round as well. Again, I just think that offense is going to be a very slow-paced offense. Adam Gase is one of the slowest running offensive coaches in the league. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell and Robbie Anderson are going to be the focal points of that offense. And, of course, when Chris Herndon gets back from suspension, he'll probably have a role as well. So Jamison Crowder in the 8th round, I thought was also a bit high there. And then I know round 16, usually when you take flyers, some sleeper players that you think might break out. But Damare Crockett by Saved by LaBelle. I don't want to brag too much, but I feel like I know a good amount about football and the rosters, and I've never heard of that player before. So I just thought that pick might have been a bit high for that player. I think that player could have certainly come off of waivers if Duke Johnson or Carlos Hyde happen to not perform well and they get into a starting role. So I thought that pick might have been a bit high.
Okay. So some of the stuff that I thought was bad values was one off of Annie's team, so piggybacking off of her team. Taking Vance McDonald in any round besides the last 1 or 2 rounds is an extreme reach. Taking Vance McDonald in the 8th round is just way too far because you can get his value in much later rounds. Another one that I felt was a little bit early was the picking of Darwin Thompson. At that point, you were really trying to go out of your way to just find lightning in a bottle, and at that point, you're picking it way too early. Because if he returns any type of flex or running back 2 value, you don't get any upside because you picked him at that position where he has to perform. Ryan, do you have any picks yourself?
Just kind of looking at the board real quick. I think you guys pretty much covered it. Just looking at where some of the defenses went. I think it's all looks pretty good.
Okay.
All right, so glad to know that we're doing our job.
Good. All right, then I think we'll just dip very briefly into the overall rosters and just kind of give our thoughts as to which teams we think might stand out. And honestly, when I looked at all the rosters, I didn't see any one roster that I thought didn't have any chance of performing. I think every team has some value and every team has its flaws, which I think is going to make for a very balanced league this year, which I'm excited about. 2 teams that did stick out to me that I think may have done better than the rest. The first being bunch of Fantasy Frittata. I thought had the number 1 overall team, and it was actually put in the analytical projections on the fantasy front page, had this team ranked number 1. Again, having Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, one of the top 3 quarterbacks, I think, and then getting James Conner and Mark Ingram, I think, are just 2 very good, solid running backs to have. Of course, the other starting lineup, Julio Jones is an absolute stud, and grabbing Julian Edelman as your wide receiver 2, I think he has a chance to be wide receiver 1. So I think those are 2 good picks. And then George Kittle at the tight end, you're getting a top 3 player at the tight end position too. So I think there are top players at each starting position there. And I think, again, the bench I think might have some holes in it. But, again, like I mentioned, having Devin Singletary I thought was one of the steals of the draft. So having that player on the bench there, I just think elevates it to the point where it's a very solid team overall. And then my second team, which I thought did very well, and I think maybe not so much has a great bench depth, but I just really liked the starting lineup, and that was Team Yankster. Again, Drew Brees I thought got drafted a little high, but I think Drew Brees can still give some value. Again, Ezekiel Elliott with the report, him signing the extension, has the chance to be the number one player in fantasy this year. Grabbing him and James White, who I think is a very solid running back 2 in PPR. Of course, having Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, who I think, again, could be 2 wide receiver 1s this year. And then Sterling Shepard, who I think has a sleeper chance to have running wide receiver 2 upside, especially if he is the number 1 option in the Giants passing offense. Of course, having Saquon there will play a role, but other than that, I think overall the team performed very well, and I think this team has a chance to compete at least early on and pick up some wins in the year, and we'll see how the waiver wire goes with this team in terms of their bench.
And then, for me, in my opinion, I do believe that I agree with what Trevor said. Mikey's team, I think I would give the nod to over Chris. But then again, showing a little bit of personal bias, being that I drafted my team, I like a lot of the players on my team. But I won't talk about me because obviously I like what I'm doing. I'll talk about a little bit about Trevor's team, though. I do like some of the value he got. Like you mentioned, with Kamara falling all the way to 7, you're getting top running back value towards the later half of the first round, which is always a great way to start your team. And then coming back with Juju Smith-Schuster, you'll have a running back 1 and an RB1 throughout the entire year, as well as later picks throughout the draft, such as I mentioned earlier, Austin Eckler really helps shore up any running back questions that might arise throughout the year with injuries. So good, it's nice he has good depth throughout the position, as well as everyone else has known that I am not a big fan of taking quarterbacks early in the draft. The Jameis Winston pick was a solid pick later in the draft because you never want to reach on quarterbacks because you can be getting value at positions that are harder to find, such as running backs and wide receivers. Do you have any opinion? Oh, Ryan, do you have any opinion on what you think might be a good quality team?
I'm thinking my team probably, and I'm thinking that could be a good quality team or a complete disaster. But I'm thinking if everything plays out, I'm thinking like we kind of mentioned earlier, if Fournette comes back to what he's projected to be. I know there's an article that came out a couple weeks ago saying that Fournette he personally felt that he has not been his best self, but this year he plans on being his best self. So after reading that and seeing how he feels, I'm pretty excited to see what he brings on the field. Also, Tyreek Hill, just a pretty standard, pretty reliable pick there. Todd Gurley, not too sure about that. I know he had a little bit of an injury last season, but I'm thinking they'll get over that and be Todd Gurley that we all know and love. Josh Gordon, I hope again he stayed off the drugs. It's all dependent on his his vices and how he deals with his demons. But we'll see how that plays out. Jarvis Landry, honestly, I just love him as a person, so I always pick him in my drafts. Will he be a great player? Will he be on my flex? Probably not, but he'll be somewhere on my bench, so that's fine. So I'm pretty happy with my team. I think in Golden Tate as well. Again, not somebody I'm going to be playing anytime soon because, for reasons. But I think it's a great pick. And I think the team I have, I think is probably my favorite team in the draft.
Yeah. I'll say I wouldn't say that is my favorite team in the draft, but it definitely has potentially the most upside. Being that, like you said, with Todd Gurley, he was the number 1 running back through our fantasy last year. But like you said, you're hoping he can get better from his injuries. I don't know how easily arthritis goes away, so that might be a lingering issue throughout the season. Melvin Gordon has running back 1 potential, but then again, he has to show up and actually get on the field to get those points. Tyreek Hill is a solid wide receiver. He's fine. Josh Gordon, like you said, is either boom or bust. You're either going to get a great performance because he has so much just raw potential, raw talent, but his issue has been staying on the field and being able to show all that talent. So I feel like your team will either do very well or last place. No in between.
There you go. It's the risk I'm willing to take.
There it is. So I think briefly, guys, I think we could just maybe go through the various matchups this week and kind of give maybe our picks. I think that's something we might be doing each week too, is kind of giving the picks as to what we think each game will go. And we'll start with the first matchup, Saved by LaBelle versus the Prisoner of HC 109. Joey, how do you see this matchup unfolding?
I definitely see this matchup leaning more towards the Prisoner of HC 109's way. I would give them the nod. They might lose out on quarterback, giving Matt Ryan the slight nod. But then Kamara and Kerryon Johnson over Le'Veon Bell and Josh Jacobs. I'll give the prisoner of HC 109 the nod over there. And then at wide receiver, I would give Antonio Brown and Cooper Kupp a slight nod over Juju Smith-Schuster and Robert Woods, just because you don't know what's going to happen with that Los Angeles Rams offense, especially out of the passing game. You don't know if they'll be able to duplicate what they had done last year. But then moving down to tight end, I will give Evan Ingram the nod over Vance McDonald. Like I mentioned earlier, I feel like he was taken way too early in the draft. He's a decent value if you had taken him later and were able to get someone better at one of your other positions as running back and wide receiver. And then I would give Austin Eckler the edge over Tyler Boyd at flex. Like I mentioned, if Melvin Gordon doesn't play, he has a lot of upside of being that running back one. And then defenses and kickers are defenses and kickers. So for the most part, they will normally balance each other out. So I'm not gonna look too much into that when making projections.
What about you, Ryan? Do you have any thoughts on this game?
Kind of just going off of what Joey said, I think the prisoner of the prisoner of HC 109 has a very good chance of winning. Pretty much going off the projections, everything Joey said, some key positions that kind of outweigh basically what Saved by LaBelle is bringing. So yeah. I think prisoner of HC 109 has a really good chance of making a significant win this week.
Yeah. I think the big play will be in the RB2 category. Kerryon Johnson versus Josh Jacobs. It'll be interesting to see how Kerryon performs. I had high hopes for him this year, so we'll see how he does in his first game on the road against a very young Arizona defense. And, of course, Josh Jacobs, the rookie going out in prime time against a very good Denver defense, so I think that'll be an interesting matchup. But I do believe the prisoner of HG 109 will come away victorious there. And then the second game, we have CJ Rocks versus Team Yankster. Ryan, we'll start with you, I guess. How do you see this one panning out, really?
I'm probably going to take Team Yankster. Actually taking a quick look at this again. No, I'm going to say again, Team Yankster. That's what I'm saying. I think T.Y. Hilton, I do not think is going to perform this year as well as did last year. I think that's transpired. And I just think that pretty much in every position that Team Yankster has the edge over CJ Rocks.
All right.
Joey, prediction.
Do you have anything?
Going through, I definitely would give Patrick Mahomes the edge over Drew Brees, but then at running back with Ezekiel Elliott signing and me knowing how bad the Giants' defense is, even with drafting Dexter Lawrence up front, I feel that they're not going to be able to stop the run, especially with that high-powered Dallas Cowboys run game, especially with that amazing offensive line that they have. So I would give the running back nod 1 and 2. Just because since we are in a PPR league and James White does catch so many passes, he'll give you fine value every week. In wide receivers, I would agree with what Ryan said, that T.Y. Hilton, you don't know what's going to happen with that Indianapolis offense with Angelique retiring. So I'd give the wide receiver nod to Team Yankster as well. The only really big question about Team Yankster is the tight end position. Just because you never really know what's going to happen with Kyle Rudolph. He might give you very, very few amount of points for 8 weeks in a row, and then he can go off for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you really never know. He has those flash in the pan opportunities. And then with flex, I've never been a big Kenyon Drake fan. I just don't really trust that Miami offense. So I would give Sterling Shepard because I think the Giants are going to be losing throughout this game, so they're going to need to be passing the ball. So Sterling Shepard will be a good value over there.
I do think just with Team Yankster, I believe Team Yankster has the advantage in this one, and I project them to pull this out. But I will say 2 things just to keep an eye on, of course. Amari Cooper and Sterling Shepard both battling injuries in training camp. So their status will definitely play a role into how they'll perform overall, but I do believe Yankster has a good chance to pull this one out. The next we have Michael Ramos, Capuchins versus Team Lair Bears. So I'll start with this one. I think a matchup to definitely look at is going to be really just the quarterback position. I think is going to be a big spot. Again, Aaron Rodgers, we know what he's done in his career. Last year he had a bit of injury that was plaguing him. And, I think this year with the new head coach, a new offensive scheme implemented, it'll be interesting to see how he comes out Thursday Night Football, the first game of the year. And Lamar Jackson, I have I have huge hopes for Lamar Jackson this year. I think he's going to be a breakout star, and I think he has top 5 quarterback potential. So I think that'll be a very interesting matchup at that position. Overall, I would give the slight edge, I think, just to the Michael Ramos Capuchins. Again, I just think that they have some good star power. It's more so, I think this week they'll be fine. It's a matter of how will they look in 3 weeks. I think will be more of the question there.
Yes, this is one of my teams, Michael Ramos Capuchin. So I'm just thinking that some things to just point out. So as good as Saquon is, he was the first pick in our draft. I think going against the Dallas Cowboys is maybe not the best matchup for him this week. But I think for Leonard Fournette going against Kansas City, it's a little better matchup for our running back. So I think I'm a little more confident this week going against Team Lair Bears. I think Tyreek Hill will be fine. Lamar Jackson, I'm excited to see what he does this year. He will be running the ball a lot, so we'll see what that results in points. I just think that I have a slight edge over Team Lair Bears, but I think it might be a close week.
I think I'm going to go opposite from two of you guys. I actually give the slight edge to Team Lair Bears just because of how many question marks there are with the Michael Ramos Capuchins, because you don't know how much Todd Gurley is going to get, how many touches he's going to get. He very well could go out, only get 10 to 12 touches. In that case, you can't really expect too many points. Leonard Fournette could go down on any play, so he's always a risk for an injury and only playing 1 quarter. Josh Gordon, you hope just for the best for him that he can stay on the field and really become a big factor in the Patriots passing offense, but you never know. And then giving Zach Ertz definitely gets the edge over Austin Hooper. I think that the Team Lair Bears does not have the best matchups, so it could go either way. But I feel that Saquon Barkley is a very reliable start every week. Zach Ertz is a very reliable start every week. So you feel a little bit more confident picking Team Lair Bears this week for me.
Now the 4th game, we have Champagne in my OBJ versus Run CMC. So we'll start with Ryan on this one. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this potential matchup? Which way do you think it could go?
I'm just taking a quick glance at this right now. I'm probably going to take... I'm definitely going to take Run CMC. I'm just thinking basically the entire roster as a whole, the matchups they have. I just think that there's a lot more... just a lot more upside. I think having Travis Kelce, the tight end position, definitely beats out Hunter Henry. I think Christian McCaffrey, obviously, going against the Rams, will prove to be definitely a factor in this matchup. So I just think, in general, I'm going to take Run CMC on this one in a pretty wide margin.
Joey?
It being my team, and like I said, I'm a big fan of how my team turned out. I'm also taking me, like Ryan said, Christian McCaffrey. I see him completely edging out Chris Carson. Derrick Henry, I'm a big fan of his this year, just because of the fact that they do have, since he's become more of the number 1 guy in Tennessee, so it seems that he's going to get a lot more touches this year. And against a Cleveland run defense that was ranked in the lower half of the league last year, even though they have made some acquisitions over the offseason, I do think that somewhere there they might have a little bit of an issue. In terms of wide receiver, I do like Odell Beckham going up against Tennessee, even though they do have a decent secondary, good defensive backs, which may cause to be an issue. But I still think Odell Beckham will get his throughout this week. Same thing with Mike Evans. When you have someone of that caliber, that talent, going against a San Francisco defense that is not known to really refrain teams from scoring, that he might get some points. But I do think that Chris Godwin in the Tampa Bay offense that will be losing a lot of their games, I feel like they will be throwing the ball because they have absolutely no run game with Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones. So I think that Chris Godwin will do similar with Mike Evans and catch a lot of balls this week. Hopefully Chris Godwin gets in the end zone. Allen Robinson is he's kind of a risk. You never know what's going to happen with that Bears offense. Because Matt Nagy is so kind of versatile in how he runs that offense. But like Ryan said, Travis Kelce, I would take him over any other tight end in the league. So that's somewhere I definitely feel like I have a matchup. And then David Montgomery, with the loss of Jordan Howard, and it seems that Tariq Cohen is taking a step back in that offense. He really, David Montgomery, I really feel like he'll be a large factor in that offense. So I give him the nod over Mike Williams. And like I said earlier, defense and kickers, you have no idea what they're going to do.
So this one for me, I have as actually my game of the week, and I also have this as my upset of the week. I like Champagne in my OBJ on this one. Not necessarily for total, but just kind of in specific players. Run CMC has two of my least favorite players in fantasy this year. In Mitchell Trubisky, I just don't believe in him as a quarterback at all. So I think he's going to take a big step down. And in PPR, I have Derrick Henry outside of my top 30 in running backs, so I just don't like him, especially going to Cleveland with no passing game. I don't see him getting more than 50 rushing yards at best. And then in Champagne in my OBJ has Chris Carson, which is one of my actual favorite players in fantasy this year. I really think Chris Carson could be a breakout candidate in this Seahawks running game, especially with Russell Wilson might be taking more of a backseat role. And of course, the offense shifting more towards a run-heavy approach. I like that matchup there, especially with Cincinnati coming to town. And I think that they will end up pulling out the upset. So I'm really looking forward to that one.
I'm a little hurt, not going to lie.
So our next game, we have a bunch of fantasy frittata against cooking up a win. Due to maybe some time constraints, we might just go rapid fire as to who we think will win these last two matchups, and maybe just give a quick blurb as to why we think so. So I'll start with you, Joey. Win this matchup, who do you think has the ability to pull this one out and why?
I'm going to give the nod to a bunch of fantasy frittata. Big fan of a lot of the players like we mentioned earlier. I give them the nod at quarterback, both running backs. Their wide receivers can compete. I give the slight nod to cooking up a win. George Kittle definitely gets the nod over Delaney Walker. And Miles Sanders and DJ Moore, I feel like they kind of balance out each other. So I'm going a bunch of fantasy frittata.
I'm taking frittata as well. I think just looking at cooking up a win, I think Brandon Cooks, pretty hit or miss depending on the week, could be definitely a breakout player in your team, but also can be a complete bust depending on the matchup of the week. So I think that Brandon Cooks is kind of unreliable in that sense. I also think Dalvin Cook, obviously, we're not really sure with him. I know he's been some injuries in the past. I don't know how well he'll do this year. Same thing with Carson Wentz. I'm not entirely sure if they will play to their full potential. So I just think, in general, looking at Frittata's team, I think it's a safer bet, and I will take Frittata to win that week.
Frittata for me too. That'll make three of us. I just think the roster, again, like I said, the best roster in this league, and I just think they're going to show up in week one and pull out the W, quite honestly. In our final matchup, we have Hooked on a Thielen, who's projected to score the least points in week one against the Comeback Kids. Guys, what do we think about this one? Who do we like pulling this one out? I guess I'll go first. I will give the slight edge. I think, and I really don't like doing this on any fantasy team, drafting and having three players from the same team starting, which is what Hooked on a Thielen is doing, but I do like Cleveland's matchup this week against Tennessee. I think it will be close, but I still think they'll be able to get the points necessary, and I think Nick Chubb will have a big game, and of course Davante Adams, even though he's at Chicago, I still think he's one of the most consistent wide receivers in the NFL. I'll take Hooked on a Thielen in a close one here.
I'm also going to take Hooked on a Thielen. I think the crotch grabber, Baker Mayfield, is probably... I think he's going to have a great year this year, so I think at the QB position he definitely beats out Ben Roethlisberger. Nick Chubb, I think obviously had a great year last year, so he's going to continue that into this year. Philip Lindsay, talk about a running back that really last year just completely blew everyone out of the water, so I think there you have no issue. Davante Adams, of course, another one, just an amazing year last year. I think he'll continue that. So just all in all, and Adam Thielen, you don't need to say any more about that. So I think just in general, Thielen has a slight edge over the Comeback Kids. I just think that will prove out this week in that matchup.
I think on this one, I might go the other way. I might have to go with the Comeback Kids. Don't get me wrong, I am a huge fan of that Cleveland offense. I think they will do a lot of great things. I'm a big fan of Nick Chubb, especially with this matchup they have. but I might have to go with the comeback kids just for the fact that Joe Mixon is becoming much more of is a very good passing threat in that Bengals offense. And because they've had some issues with their offensive line, they might try and get him out of the backfield quick and get him for a lot of screen passes. Aaron Jones always has that ability to break one loose. He's got so much big play potential in his game, as well as Michael Thomas. You can never really doubt what his capabilities, especially against Houston, which has notoriously had some issues, especially now that they've traded away J.D. McCloud. They might have some issues getting to the quarterback, which you never want to leave Drew Brees time to find his number one guy. Diggs, he's a solid player. They're playing indoors, so against Atlanta, I feel this could be a very high-scoring game. And then O.J. Howard, like I mentioned earlier, I think Tampa Bay will be throwing the ball a lot, so it will help all of their pass-catching players. And I think Calvin Ridley, like I mentioned, it could be a high-scoring game. I think he's good. He can catch at least one touchdown, which really would help give the comeback kids the nod for the week.
All right, that's every matchup in week 1. So I think at that point we can wrap this podcast up. Again, guys, this one probably went a little bit longer than we would have liked, so please let us know what you thought of it, and if there's any changes you want us to make, anything you want us to add. Please, you guys are our fans. We love all of you, and we want to make this podcast as successful as possible. Hopefully we'll come to you guys once a week again and try to get you as much content as you want. And if you want anything added to it, let us know. If you want us to get anything changed, let us know. Shortened, lengthened, what have you. Just shoot us a quick text. You know my number. Prisoner of HC109 here. Hopefully it'll be a great fantasy football year. I'm excited, looking forward to it. And, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Let's hope there's a lot of high-scoring games. Makes it a lot more fun to watch, and not nearly as many roughing the quarterback penalties. So let's hope for that. Let's hope for a great Sunday.
Absolutely.
Definitely want to thank Joey and Trevor for letting me on this week. It was a great experience talking to you guys about fantasy. I just want to wish you guys all the best luck in your fantasy endeavors this year. Just great having me on.
Definitely safe trip back home, Ryan. We hope to see you again soon. And to everybody else, Shabbat Shalom.
All right, take care. See you next week.